Release the Kraken!
Greetings, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios, and today is a special one because it is my first video devlog. Now, I say that, but I've actually done devlogs before. Anyone who's followed me on Facebook or Twitter or checked out my blog, you guys all know that I post things regularly about the projects that I'm working on. But today is my first video devlog, and that's special because it's about my first video game, or at least the first game that's going to be released under the Lame Duck Studios umbrella. And I'm sure you all know at this point what game I'm talking about. It is Rocket Flip. Now, Rocket Flip is a simple action clicker game for Android, and throughout this devlog you're going to see how it was put together, the trials and tribulations of all that went into the development of it, because it is a simple game, and the challenge of it for me is to try to keep things simple. That's one of those things that I struggle with, because I always have to polish a turd into a diamond, and it's just the way that I am. My students will tell you that no matter how simple we try to keep it, it always goes out a little bit extra. So throughout this, you'll get to see how a project that was supposed to be about 3 weeks long ended up being about 6 months or so. And with that, here is devlog 1 for Rocket Flip. Rocket Flip began as a teaching aid for my classes back in late 2019. Many of you may remember this as the Simple Ship project. The actual idea for the game came accidentally during a lecture when I bungled the collision physics for the ship weapons, which unintentionally caused it to flip. After a few playful attempts trying to land it, I realized I had stumbled onto something fun, and later that afternoon, I began writing the game. The base rocket you see here is from my lecture, and it worked so well that I decided to keep it, and the cartoony aesthetic helped shape the stylistic look of the game. By the end of that first evening I had something playable, but it would take another month or so of fine-tuning to get the feel of the game just right. In my opinion, how a game feels is the most important thing to a player, and I'm not alone in that. The developers of Skullgirls, Hollow Knight, and Celeste understand the importance of game feel, so much so that they spend a large chunk of their production time on exactly that. A game can look pretty, but if it's sluggish, floaty, or unresponsive, then your player base isn't likely to stick around for very long. So, I spent a lot of time on this. I experimented with Unreal's robust physics engine, but was disheartened by two things. The first, Unreal was made for first-person shooters, namely games like Unreal Tournament, Gears of War, and Fortnite. That seems fine on paper, until you realize the developers never intended for objects to topple over themselves in quite the way that I needed. In fact, the maximum pitch angle is only 90 degrees. That was the first problem. The second is the physics engine is tuned to the frame rate, not the system clock. This is done to create a smoother player experience, which is good in most cases. The downside is, this causes time to be warped around a given frame rate. That means games playing across different devices will respond differently, even if the starting values of a given input are the same, which doesn't bode well when you need the input of a single tap to result in repeatable, reliable physics. And I know someone in the comments is going to be like, "Well, you know, Goku, all you gotta do is use delta seconds instead of tick." Here's the documentation, buddy. The tick function is called every frame, and delta seconds is the game time elapsed during the last frame, modified by time dilation. The documentation itself says it's frame dependent, so don't give me that. Also, here's everyone else who's complaining about it. This caused so much irritation that I actually spent an evening rewriting the game in Unity. Sadly, I discovered that even though the physics seemed better, the pitch rotations were still restricted to 90 degrees, just like Unreal. Sunken cost fallacy aside, I figured if I have to rewrite the rotations anyway, I might as well do it in the engine I'm comfortable in. Plus, Unity just feels weird. One recommended approach to the physics issue is to turn on substepping in the project settings. This feature is experimental, and unfortunately, is not supported on mobile devices. Since Rocket Flip was intended to run on Android, this option wouldn't work for me. Instead, I settled for capping the frame rate and internal clock speed to 30 frames per second for all platforms, which resulted in comparable physics on all tested devices running Android 8.1 or above. That took care of the physics calculations, but rotations were still broken. If you remember, 90 degrees is the max pitch angle in Unreal. The reason for this is to avoid gimbal lock, a common problem when using Euler angles, which is a standard rotation model in many 3D applications, including the Unreal Engine. The condition of gimbal lock occurs when rotation vectors overlap, and from a mathematical standpoint, become indistinguishable from one another. For more information on this, check out GuerillaCG's video, shown here. The link is in the description. He explains it a lot better than I ever could, and in more detail than I intend to in this devlog. There are two ways around gimbal lock. The first is to change the rotation order for the given rotation you're trying to achieve. The other option is to not use Euler angles to begin with, and instead use quaternions, which don't suffer from the gimbal lock issue. So I spent a weekend studying the two methods. As it turns out, Unreal's physics engine does compute quaternions at the lower level in C++, but there isn't a method for this in Blueprint. Thankfully, Nebula Games has provided a free Blueprint library for anyone with a little programming know-how and familiarity with the copy-paste button. There's also a downloadable plugin in the Unreal Marketplace by the ImmutableLambda for $5. The links to these are in the description below. So what did I actually decide to do? I experimented with the various options, but ultimately decided to compute rotations directly through the physics engine using angular velocity, which solved the rotation issue and removed any need to reinvent the wheel. Anyways, that's all I wanted to cover in this devlog. If you found this to be educational and enjoyable, please hit that like button and subscribe. If you'd like to play Rocket Flip, head over to lameduckstudios.com. The link is in the description below, and request a demo of the game. It's currently in closed alpha testing. I'm going to open it up to the public once I have 4 levels and 10 missions available. Right now I have 3 levels and 6 missions, so I'm not too far away. Anyways, thank you for checking out the devlog. Stay tuned for the next one, and I shall see you next time.